the disclosure that if someone doesn't want to be recorded, then you'll want to drop off the call now and then just listen in later. So another component around building the teams is also ensuring that psychological safety is there. It's kind of a companion to the diversity component. So psychological safety is being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences of status, career, or self-worth. We should be comfortable with being ourselves in our work setting, excuse me. So this phrase of psychological safety was, it came about from a Harvard professor in the 90s. The thought process was that people and teams do their best work when they feel comfortable being themselves on the job. And so it's about being respectful, being humble, be ethical and trustworthy, and make it safe to fail. And when I hear like make it safe to fail, I think about something that you hear particularly in Agile a lot, which is like fail fast. But what it really just kind of comes down to is people, your team should feel trusted to be able to make decisions, even if it might be the wrong decision, understanding that we made a decision, it was wrong, and then we need to just quickly move to the next solution. So healthy work settings embrace diversity, are built on trust and mutual respect, and they ensure ethical decision making. Sorry. So psychological safety goes hand in hand with diversity. So even though this again is an agile concept, it can also be useful in a predictive or a hybrid team environment as well. No matter what, trust and mutual respect is going to be essential to an empowered team. So just make sure that not just you as the leader, but that your team recognizes that everyone is responsible for ensuring that the other members of the team feel like it's a healthy environment for them and they feel embraced. Some of the stuff on here should look familiar. I know I had heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs long before I took the PMP prep class, but motivating people is a large part of a project manager's job. And so you want to make sure that you know these motivation theories for the PMP certification exam. And motivation can be difficult because not everyone is motivated by the same type of reward, right? Motivation can inspire, encourage, and stimulate individuals and project teams to achieve great accomplishments. It can also create an environment that fosters teamwork and collective initiatives to reach common goals or objectives. The level of motivation of an individual or team that they apply to the project efforts ends up affecting all aspects of the project results. So when you look at these theories, these are standard knowledge areas for business practitioners, and project managers and project team members both benefit from personal professional development on the topics that we have here. And so we'll go into each topic individually, but the topics that we'll talk about are Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Hertzberg's motivation hygiene theory, McGregor's theory, X and Y, and McClellan's achievement motivation theory. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are there people on the call who has heard of this before? I know I had heard of it before. It seems pretty popular. Has anybody else heard of it before as well?
Yep, I've heard of it. Pretty common, I think.
I agree. I agree. Thank you. Um, this came from a psychology professor named Abraham Maslow. Um, he he brought about this thing called like humanistic psychology, a discipline just focusing on the belief that humans as individuals are unique beings and should be recognized and treated as such, right? It sounds so basic, but it's so important. And so he did a paper in 1943 called A Theory of Human Motivation, which is basically where these needs were summed up from. And so he grouped human needs into 5 categories, which humans fulfill progressively, and they start from bottom to top. So what that means is that the underlying needs at the bottom have to be fulfilled before the ones at the top are attempted. So you think about, how does this relate to you motivating your team? Um, you want to be able to encourage people so that they are empowered to undertake the 5th level of self-actualization, which is the pinnacle, right? The top, the highest you can go. So the very bottom one, psychological needs. This one seems pretty simple. Any guesses on what psychological needs means?
I think physiological needs are like food, water, shelter.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the basic elements that you need to survive: food, water, sleep. So if you can meet that need, then you go up to safety needs, right? Safety needs feels pretty self-explanatory. It's just a person needs to feel safe from physical or economical harm. So if you can meet the physiological and safety needs, then comes your social needs, right? And even for strong introverts like myself, social needs include the desire to give and receive affection and be a part of a group, right? So you see people are progressively moving up. As you meet one need, then you can go to the next one. Esteem needs have to do with the recognition received from others, as well as with your own self-esteem and how you view yourself. And then the 5th need, the top, is self-actualization. So those are desires of an individual has for self-fulfillment and developing to their full potential. So like best case scenario, you have a team operating where the vast majority of your team are all on that 5th level, that they're all in a self-actualization stage, where they're really looking at self-fulfillment and want to do their best, developing themselves to their fullest potential. Questions on Maslow's hierarchy of needs or anything that we've talked about up to this point? Hertzberg's motivation hygiene theory, also known as the 2-factor theory. This is from Frederick Hertzberg, and his theory basically says that success in the workplace is based upon 2 elements: hygiene factors and motivators. Hygiene factors relate to working conditions. So a stable job, good relationship with management and coworkers. And the motivating factors relate to feelings of achievement, like recognition, career advancement. So, according to Hertzberg, hygiene issues can't necessarily motivate employees, but they can minimize dissatisfaction. So the only way it can really negatively impact employee is if it's absent or if it's mishandled. But it can't necessarily motivate them either, right? So salary and a good working environment isn't necessarily enough to push someone to go above and beyond. But when they're not there, they can definitely cause someone to not perform, right? It can dissatisfy. Um, some examples of hygiene topics could be company policies, supervision, salary, interpersonal relationships, and working conditions, anything related to the employees' environment, right? And it's even more prevalent now as a lot of people are actually back in the office. And so sometimes it can also be things literally and physically in the office that's impacting the work environment for your team. Motivators, on the other hand, create satisfaction by fulfilling individuals' needs for meaning and personal growth. So there's issues like achievement, recognition, the actual work itself that the person's doing, their responsibility and advancement. And so once the hygiene areas are addressed, then the motivators will promote job satisfaction and encourage production. So different than Maslow's in that it is a couple of different topics, but I think the overarching thought process is the same, is you've got to have your hygiene factors locked in and right. And then you got to pour into the motivators, because the motivators is what you're going to really be able to use to drive the team forward. McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X is the authoritarian. Theory Y is the participative type leader. Theory X managers are often called old-fashioned, but can anybody think of a modern context where an authoritarian management style could be helpful at all? So if you think about Theory X, it's workers dislike and avoid work. People avoid increased responsibility. People need to be directed. What is an example where this management style could be useful?
In an elementary school classroom.
Yep.
Definitely, that's a
That's
good
the first
example.
thing I thought of.
What else?
When
Military.
leading a new team, a fresh team that's actually, well, let's just put it out there. My experience, I was a UVerse manager and I had new people come in every week for about a year. So I had to, and these were younger adults. So I had to coach them, give them ideas on how to be productive in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, I used to coach UVerse reps. I get that 100%. I had that job when I first started with the company. I agree. I agree with both of those examples. I think, and similar to that, right? Um, Sometimes it may be something that the decision just isn't there for someone to be able, the team to make. It may be some of the things going on now where work is shifting and there's new roles and new teams being stood up. And every now and then it may require someone to just kind of direct, hey, this is the direction that the team needs to go in. It doesn't always feel good, but sometimes that management style can be helpful when you do need to just push to the next level and you may not have the time or the flexibility to be as collaborative as possible. Theory Y, people want to be active, workers seek job satisfaction, and they don't require direction. So this is from Douglas McGregor. His theories apply to the way you manage labor in the field of social psychology. He has the book, The Human Side of Enterprise, which refers to two styles of management, the authoritarian and the participative. Managers who adopt the Theory X approach tend to take a pessimistic view of their people and assume that they're naturally unmotivated and dislike work. Work in organizations that are managed like this can be repetitive, and people are often motivated with a carrot and stick approach. Theory Y is essentially the opposite. People want to work and enjoy it, and management does not need to hover and constantly supervise. In project management application, agile team environments are going to always adopt the Theory Y approach. So we see two different ways that you can use to characterize people in the workforce. I think it's easy to look at a team being led on Theory X and think that that team's only interested in their own goals, they're unmotivated or dislike work, and you have to force them to be productive. And so it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, because it requires an authoritarian management style and constant supervision to achieve the results required for that project, because that's how the team's foundation's been set up. Theory Y assumes that people are naturally ambitious, self-motivated, and they do good work and exercise self-control. So as a result, they need very little external motivation, and they'll seek out responsibility and can be trusted to work on their own to achieve the project goals. So it's important to not only understand the motivation of the team members, but also of the project manager or the team leader. A Theory X project manager may want to micromanage the team members, where Theory Y project manager holds back and let the team members determine the way to proceed. But it doesn't always have to be negative. The problem really arises if there's a conflict between these two styles. So a Theory X manager who may manage a team that's used to Theory Y, or conversely, when a Theory Y manager is responsible for managing individuals that are set in a Theory X mindset. So what you just want to take from this is that Theory Y almost always applies to the composition of team members working in a more agile or adaptive environment where the team is expected to be self-organized and self-starters without the need for maybe a more command and control leader. But you know, if you are maybe, for example, like I'm an Army veteran, right? Like military is going to be authoritarian. It's not going to be the style set where it's going to be participative. That's not the type of environment. Or maybe you're in a factory, right? And it's a safety thing where we can't really negotiate about how things work. So you probably won't see anything around like military or factory safety or high risk or hazard conditions, but know that the vast majority of the time, your thought process is going to always be a team that's self-directed. But if you're thrown through a loop and it just makes sense that you would need an authoritarian one for something like, you know, leading a military team, for example, or high risk or hazard conditions, that in that case, Theory X may be more useful. Does someone have a question? Because I heard someone talking. I don't know if anybody had a question. Okay. And McClellan's achievement motivation theory. This is from David McClellan. And his theory basically states that an individual's needs are shaped by life experiences, largely depending on culture and their life experiences. So it states that we have three needs, and one becomes dominant in our personalities. So effective project managers know how to motivate each type of individual, but then also how to encourage balance, which is needed on project teams. You want to use this information to influence goal setting, feedback, and how you motivate or reward your teams. You want to think about designing or crafting roles around team member strengths and identify a need for balance to potentially create T-shaped people and high-performing project teams. And T-shape, does anybody know what T-shape means?
Yes, we had it on previous sessions.
Perfect. Perfect. So then you're good with the fact that it's the person's like depth and breadth of their expertise. So what we see over here is achievement, affiliation, and power. Achievement, this motivator has a strong need to set and accomplish challenging goals. They take calculated risks to accomplish their goals. They like to receive regular feedback on their progress and achievements, and they often like to work alone. A person who has an affiliation motivator wants to belong to the group. They want to be liked and will often go along with whatever the rest of the group wants to do. They favor collaboration over competition, and they don't like high risk or uncertainty. And third one is power. A power motivator wants to control and influence others. They like to win arguments. They enjoy competition and winning, and they enjoy status and recognition. So under this theory, what you want to do is determine like where your team members' strengths lie, where they are, what, and then determine what motivates them and how you set up their goals based on what their motivating factors are. Upholding team and charter ground rules. So the team charter and ground rules should be reviewed and updated as needed on a periodic basis. This checklist of questions will help ensure the ground rules are maintained throughout the project. You've got to have some type of ground rules set as you're developing your team. So when the project is in motion, the team should always have the ground rules close at hand. If the project context experiences change, the team charter or ground rules might need to be updated. Ideally, the team should go through the forming stage again whenever it changes, but this can happen quickly in dynamic projects. Lastly, if a rule's been violated, the team needs to ensure that the appropriate response, depending on leadership and composition of team, and coach that team member back into alignment. So that's something to keep in mind and remember. It is not often, but disciplinary action is reserved for serious violations of ground rules. So as you create the team charter and ground rules, think about, are the rules visible? Has anything changed and we need to now update them? Are new team members inducted properly, right? You can't hold them to a standard that they haven't been covered on. Has a ground rule been violated or broken? If so, you want to ensure that the appropriate response is taken, remind the team about mutual agreement, coach your team, think through the lens of servant leadership, and save harsh disciplinary action for severe violations only. Rewards and recognition. As a leader, you want to think about a reward and recognition plan. It's a formalized way to reinforce performance or behavior. Reward and recognition plans are generally standardized throughout an organization and improved through corporate channels, right? We have our own here. We have connection awards and things like that that we use for rewards, leadership programs, and stuff like that. The purpose is to motivate the team to perform well. So some of the rewards would be like tangible, consumable items, something for a specific outcome or achievement. It's used to motivate towards a specific outcome. And you never want to reward without recognition, right? So the person should know why they're getting rewarded. Um, Rewards can be monetary gifts, additional vacation time, company plaques or trophies or small gifts. A lot of times you'll see rewards and recognition used interchangeably, but they are different, right? So if you look at recognition, um, you can recognize a person without giving them a reward. So you want to be transparent and fair when using rewards and recognition. People need to know how they can be achieved. Some ways you can recognize, some types of recognition are intangible, experiential events, acknowledging the person's behavior rather than an outcome. Use it to increase the recipient's feeling of appreciation. And it can be given without a reward, a simple recognition. Be transparent and judicious when using rewards and recognition. Monitor for any negative effects resulting from misplaced competitiveness or animosity. Tailor your rewards and recognition. Not everybody is excited by the same reward. When given too often, it can become expected rather than earned. Individual and team rewards and recognition can be used. It doesn't always have to just be to the individual team members. And sometimes individual recognition and rewards can create unwanted competition or animosity. So I know, for example, me, I don't like public recognition. I do like to be told when I do something well, but I don't like to be told in like a team format. I prefer a private side note from my supervisor. That's just me. but that motivates me. I'm very uncomfortable with public recognition. So this is really just about understanding the dynamics of your team and understanding that you don't want to just apply how you like to be rewarded or recognized to everybody on the team, or how you're a top performer. Like, how do you, that's the way that you get other people to be top performers, is meeting them with the rewards and recognition that motivates them. Questions about rewards, recognition? Decision making, empowering the team to act. So your team charter will identify decision making and conflict resolution criteria. Teams establish their own norms or way of working for making decisions, and they always try to achieve consensus. Consensus is the group's decision technique. Where the group agrees to support an outcome, even if the individuals don't agree with the decision. So decision making is a core function of all teams. They're going to have to make decisions around activities, risks, estimates, and many other challenges. Forming a team includes deciding how the team will make decisions together and how they'll handle conflict resolution when a disagreement may arise. So, generally speaking, it's highly desirable to seek a consensus, but the team may want to think through how they'll respond if a consensus can't be reached. A lot of times teams decide in advance how to handle persistent disagreements. And we'll go over a couple of those methods coming up in the next couple of slides. So decision making is a core function of all teams. Um, you want to include your team in clarifying and prioritizing the requirements, splitting requirements into tasks, estimating efforts, and then also thinking about risk. How do you classify and respond to risk? So, can you guys think of other challenges that can be addressed by team decision making? What about if you have an estimate? And, like, for example, that could be one where people think that we can finish something within this many days, and somebody else on the team thinks, no, it actually is going to take us longer, or it could take us shorter, right? And you have to be able to think through the project and how you handle the other dependencies on that date, right? So that would be an example of something that you'd have to then decide. If the entire team doesn't agree with person A or person B, how do you move forward? What date or estimate do you decide to use? That'd be one example, right? Or sometimes it could be scope, right? Like maybe a stakeholder wants to add something to the scope of the project, and somebody on the team is on board and other people on the team are not on board. How does the team move forward, right? Because the longer you take to make the decision, the potential impact to the project overall. So you have a couple of different decision-making methods that your group can use to reach a decision. These techniques are assessment processes that can have many different alternatives and lead to many outcomes, right? So you have voting, consensus driven based on data. It's a way of factoring in a lot of input before making a decision. It also gives everybody on the team an equal voice and is therefore preferred a lot of times when you think about, oh, it's a democracy, everybody just gets a vote. Multi-criteria decision analysis is going to be data driven. It's hard to dispute data. So basically, you could create a decision matrix and then use a systematic analytical approach to evaluate and rank many different ideas. And then with this decision making, It's less reliant on opinions than voting is, because the data is what it is. And then you have the autocratic decision making again, right? Leadership driven based on data generally, where one team member decides for the group. Sometimes a method like that is going to be required when it's a straightforward decision that doesn't require a lot of input. So it doesn't mean that every single decision needs to necessarily always go to the team. It depends on the type of decision making and what the potential impact is. Voting breaks down to decision-making models, right? So you have unanimity, where everybody agrees on a single course of action. This is useful in project teams with great cohesion. Majority, decisions reached with greater than 50% of the group. This is great when it may be uneven amount of participants. And plurality, which is decision-making with the largest block in group deciding, even if the majority is not achieved. You use that method when there's more than 2 options nominated. Some voting methods to reach consensus: fist of 5, planning poker, dot voting, Roman voting, which is basically just thumbs up or thumbs down, although there is conversation where some leaders like middle thumb, like thumb sideways as an option, and then polling. So just make sure you have a general idea of just different what these topics mean, as far as they're recognizing which one is a potential voting method. For example, if you're up on a situation where the team needs to take a vote. Display task accountability. In predictive settings, tasks are assigned, and in that way, people are made accountable for completing specific work. So if you think about traditional waterfall, so-and-so is assigned this, and that's their job, and that's what they need to handle. But in a hybrid or adaptive team, Kanban boards are typically used. So you want to make sure that all the team members have easy access to the board so they can update their work activity on it. Some teams build their boards like on an office whiteboard, and that works great as long as the team sits in one room and they can see it. So generally that's going to be like a co-located team, for example. You want to keep work in progress visible to demonstrate transparency of work completed. So the WBS dictionary, work breakdown structure, and work package descriptions document the task and the assignees. RACI charts display roles and responsibilities. You want to encourage the team members to self-organize continuously in determining accountability standards, right? So, for example, you see here pictured is a virtual Kanban board. This isn't in a hybrid or agile environment, which is where they're generally used. This isn't for you as the project leader to use this to dole out what everybody is doing. This is more for your teams to be able to self-organize and autonomously drive what's being done, what needs to be done next, and kind of organize. So this is a great option if your team is scattered around the office, for example, because everybody can come see the board and it's hassle-free, it's easy to edit. And they do have online ones too, right? So like this is a virtual one. So if you have a remote team, everybody could also stay engaged by using a Kanban board if it's a virtual option. That's particularly helpful if you find yourself in a team where maybe the team works in different geographical locations, and so they may work different hours or things like that. And it's going to be more about this in lesson 5. So questions about task accountability at all? So this ECO, we covered leading a team, supporting diversity and inclusion, inspiring, motivating, and influencing the team members and stakeholders, as well as empowering your team and stakeholders. determining and bestow levels of decision-making authority. So next we're going to talk about supporting team member performance. And lesson 5 is going to be about supporting team performance. So this is different in that we're talking about supporting the team members. Although the title sounds similar, we're talking about similar topics, but overall it's different. This is about supporting the individuals versus the teams. And supported team members perform better and are motivated to do their best work. You will need strategies to maintain support for individuals on the whole team. These are mainly focused around, and we talked about in depth, particularly on Monday, emotional intelligence and communication. Manage and lead. Teams are generally more productive and driven when they have clear objectives to meet. Project managers can support the team by setting objectives collaboratively with the team. So management by objectives uses clear objectives to guide productivity and encourage aspiration. Set objectives collaboratively with team members. Create challenging yet attainable objectives. At the start of a project or phase and throughout the project life cycle, as like in, for example, iteration planning sessions. Servant leadership. 3 steps include defining vision, aligning people to that vision, and motivating people to pursue that vision. So project professionals collaborate to create joint objectives that are challenging yet attainable. Objective setting can be conducted at any part. It can be in the beginning or at the beginning of any phase or during any part of the product, but it's normally done throughout the project life cycle when the team is setting targets and commitments for the next period, for example, during the iteration planning session. You want to assess your team member performance so that you can identify strengths, weaknesses, aspirations, and preferences, and you can also discover opportunities for improvement. In structured teams with a project manager, performance assessments can be carried out for team members based on skills, aptitude, attitude, work style, and other characteristics. You want to use formal and informal assessment methods and conduct assessments when the team members join and then as you're monitoring them throughout the project. Self-organized agile teams in psychologically safe environments assess and regulate their own performance. The focus is the team rather than the individual. So there's generally an accepted level of trust amongst a self-organized agile team to continuously assess each other and regulate their own performance. And that's different than what we see a lot of times today with our job here, but keep it in mind when you take the test. Again, you'll probably see questions where someone is complaining about somebody's performance or things like that. And you need to think about what type of leadership style are you in? How's the team structured? And then what's the best way you should respond? Performance assessment task. On teams with project managers, employees may have formal assessments. Organizations will use their own in-house templates, but the information included will generally be standard. So you want to use performance assessments to accomplish several tasks. You want to use it to compare performance to goals, reclarify roles and responsibilities, deliver positive as well as negative feedback, discover unknown or unresolved issues, create and monitor individual training plans, and establish future goals. Personality indicators. You want to look beyond just if a person is introvert or extrovert. Some commonly used measurement tools are the Big Five personality model, Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is super popular, and DISC. It's useful to have a better understanding of the personalities on your team. So you can think, hey, maybe you want to use a personality test or indicator just to be able to create more meaningful interactions. Um, these can form friendly team building activities if used appropriately. They can be used as a way of obtaining behavioral predictors, but understand that it's not absolute, right? Because a good example would be like people who take the bird test, which is really popular with AT&T. It's for birds, but a lot of times you'll hear people say, "Oh, I'm a peagle," right? Like they still put themselves between two birds, for example, instead of just definitively saying they're one. So understand that it's a good way to predict behavior, but it's not absolute. And you always want to seek permission and explain while you're using it if you are um, doing a personality indicator or test. And so do use exercise as an icebreaker or team building activity. Use results as predictors, not absolutes, and always seek permission and explain use. Don't make fixed assumptions or judgments based on the results, and definitely don't share anyone's personal information without their permission. Um, broadly speaking, doing a personality indicator can help encourage the team to achieve and aspire as professionals, improve interactions and communications, build trust. It can help empower the team by aligning their strengths with knowledge sharing or coaching roles. You may see results of some of the tasks say introverts, extroverts, pragmatists, innovators, process followers. The point isn't to categorize people, but just to get to understand them a little bit better. So typically used in an HR or recruitment function, they attempt to measure human psychology. So just because they are based on personal attributes, you want to be mindful of proper usage. So basically, you want to use them as a guideline, not as necessarily a set rule in place. In addition to personality tests, there are psychological metrics or psychometrics that are useful for analyzing personality indicators. You can then adjust within the team to the emotional and or other needs of the team members and key project stakeholders. So personality can affect what role you have within the team, how you interact with the rest of the team, and whether your values and core beliefs align with the team's. Psychological team roles, results oriented, relationship focused, innovative, and disruptive thinkers, process and rule followers, or pragmatic. So the psychological team roles are useful for understanding how people think and what types of roles or tasks they may be best suited for. So that we have here, um, what are some roles that may be suitable for the different profiles? So someone who's results oriented, what may be a good role for them? I'll give you one, product testing. Someone who likes to test products tends to be very results oriented. Someone who is relationship focused, what would be something that they would be good at on the team? Cool, cool. Okay, so I'll just give examples that I have, I guess, for each one of them. Relationship focused, I would think like communications leader, a person who facilitates meetings. They tend to be people who like to build relationships. I think an innovative and disruptive thinker, maybe a software developer, someone who has to kind of go out and create. Process and rule followers, that's probably someone more like maybe the person who takes notes or the person who's um, responsible for building the MVP on a project that you're working on. Pragmatic will probably be a person, we talked about like artifacts and stuff, maybe the person who archives the project documents and things like that would be good for a person who's generally pragmatic. So it's 5 main components for emotional intelligence. You have emotional self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. An important interpersonal skill of all project managers is emotional intelligence. It helps you understand your emotions and those of others to help minimize conflict. The notion of emotional intelligence evolved in the 1990s and is now recognized as a key set of personal and interpersonal skills. The personal side includes self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation, whereas the interpersonal side comprises social skills and empathy. Self-awareness measures how well you know your own emotions in a variety of situations. Self-regulation defines how well you can control these emotions. Motivation describes your intrinsic reasons for achievement. Empathy is how well you read and understand the emotions of others, and social skills addresses how well you build relationships and rapport with others. So this is a emotional intelligence grid. So from self-awareness, people can begin self-regulating and become more socially aware, which leads to better relationship management capabilities, which is basically essential for healthy project team cultures. And so you have self-awareness, which includes emotional self-awareness, an accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence. Then you have under here self-management, which is your self-control, your transparency, your adaptability, your drive to achieve, and your initiative. From recognition and social, you have social awareness, which is going to include your empathy, your organizational awareness, and your service orientation. And relationship management is going to be inspirational leadership, developing others, influence, being a change catalyst, conflict management, and building bonds. So, like all these things can grow all from self awareness, right? It's the key, it's the first one. Empathy is a critical emotional intelligence skill that profoundly affects your ability to relate to and establish rapport with others. It expands vision and decision making beyond the immediate circumstance of your individual priority. Having empathy helps us to help ourselves inward and help our team outward. So, empathetic traits that make individuals more able to contribute to collaborative, high performing teams. Understanding others, being of service to others based on their particular needs and emotions, readily observing emotional cues and listening carefully, and displaying tact and appreciating or sharing others' points of view. Service orientation is happily providing proper help, understanding a customer's point of view, serving as a faithful guide, looking for strategies to increase consumer contentment and loyalty. So, outwardly, when you're thinking about helping teams versus inward, empathetic teams make this a priority. They want to develop others, they want to recognize and reward the talents and achievements of others. They provide helpful criticism in determining people's development needs. And they have coaching and mentoring when appropriate and providing tasks that stretch and nurture a person's abilities. They leverage diversity. You want to, appreciate various life philosophies and being conscious of group contrast without judgment, viewing variety as favorable circumstances, establishing conditions where different types of groups can thrive, and showing consideration for and connecting with people from diverse groups. And you want to have a political awareness. And this is basically the politics of your company. It's understanding the political truths and realities of your company and grasping the influences that determine opinions and behaviors of your clients, consumers, or rival. Understand that there's critical social systems and you want to correctly interpret crucial power connections. Social skills. Social skills draw on other emotional intelligence skill sets to build strong relationships with people and affect change in the org. High performing team members are adept at communicating, building bonds, collaboration, and cooperation, catalyzing change, managing conflict, influencing, and leadership. Motivation elements. To lead people toward having the desired social skill set, you need to motivate them. Motivation is the emotional intelligence skill associated with your personal internal abilities. It's about raising your ambition to attain peak performance. So, if we think about how to nurture and grow these factors in yourself and within your team. So, achievement drive, setting tough goals and taking chances, striving hard to get results and satisfy or exceed aspirations, discovering how to upgrade your capabilities. And you want to strive to minimize uncertainty when possible and discover ways to improve. Commitment is relying on your team's core principles to make decisions, realizing a benefit in holistic participation, gladly sacrificing to fulfill a substantial company goal, and enthusiastically searching for opportunities to help achieve the team's mission. Initiative is going to be working hard towards goals beyond what's needed or what's anticipated, inspiring others through extraordinary resourceful feats, and being prepared to seize opportunities when they arise. Lastly, is optimism, hoping to succeed instead of fearing failure, seeing reversals are caused by controllable factors instead of a personal defect, and steadily working towards your goals, regardless of whatever barriers or glitches your team may face. So that's the end of this lesson. We covered supporting team performance, appraising your team members' performance against key performance indicators, supporting and recognizing team member growth and development, determining appropriate feedback approach, and verifying performance improvements. We also talked about promoting team performance through the application of emotional intelligence, assessing behavior through using personality indicators, and analyzing personality indicators to adjust to the emotional needs of your key project stakeholders. The last part of the lesson, I think Harry will be back on Monday to cover that part with you guys to close out lesson 4. So I'm done early again. I will ask if anybody has any other questions or anything that I can answer about anything that we've talked about today. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Maria. This is great.
Thank you. I'll stay on because since we're early for another couple of minutes. If anybody wants to hang back and ask questions separately, I'm happy to answer those. If not, have a great evening and thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
Have a great evening. You were
Thanks,
great.
Maria.
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria. Great job.
Maria, I do have a question if you want to wait for just 1 minute.
Sure.
Okay, I think the beeps have stopped. So the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, do you think we, for example, for the test, we would just absolutely memorize that hierarchy?
No, I don't think you'll probably see questions specifically on like it's none of the questions will ever be generally questions that'll say which one of these is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, right? But you may see a question that says something like, and you won't see this, but this is just on the fly I can think of, right? There may be like, um, you have a person that confided in you that um their performance was slacking and they confided in you that they don't have a place to live right now and they're struggling. And it may say something like, what's something that you could do to try to get this person moving, for example. And so it may present, and again, it's not going to be anything like this, but I'm just trying to give you an example. It would say something like, um, refer the person to potential shelter providers, right? Like a home for shelter.
Mhm.
Then one may say, recommend the person for a reward. And then um, one may say something like a different section of Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like maybe one would say, I need to put it up. One might say, oh, let them know that they're a valued member of the team and you
Mhm.
really appreciate them, right? And then one may say, set a goal with them on how to improve their performance. Well, you know that in the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the basic need of having somewhere to live would be the first need that would need to be addressed. So in that example, which again would never get that person on a test, but in that example, the right answer, all of them are good answers, but the right answer would be get them some recommendations for shelter, right? Because you can't go to recognizing them and tell them that the team appreciates them if they're not meeting their basic psychological need of shelter in that example. So
Right.
it would not come out and say, which one of these is not one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It may give you a situation where one of the needs is not being met, and then it would ask you what you would do to help get that person back on track. And then you would need to recognize this is what I need to do to help them meet that need where they're at.
Okay. I see. I see. I don't know. I'm just like getting myself hyped up to memorize all this stuff.
So my feedback has been, particularly to like my mentoring group and to anybody that'll listen to me talk, is like the test is not about memorizing answers. The test is about shifting your brain to a mindset and understanding how a person thinks in this group. So the things you memorize isn't necessarily definition based or things like that. It's more along the lines of understanding where am I at in this certain process, and then what do I need to do to as the next step, right? So it's going to be two different ones. It's the first thing is going to always be, am I in traditional or I'm in agile? Because that's going to direct how you handle next. If you're in traditional predictive mindset, then what part of the process are you in? Because that process is very defined and there's different levels. And so you need to figure out what part of the process I'm in because that tells you exactly what to do. If it's an agile project that you're in, then you think in the agile mindset of what should you do next. But it's less about remembering definitions or specific answers and more about situational, what would you do in this situation? And it's going to be, generally speaking, it's always four questions, it's always four answers. Generally, two are going to be wrong,
Mhm.
really wrong, and then two are going to be really, really right, and you're
Yeah.
going to live within the two that's really, really right. And some people do stuff like highlight them. Some people cross out the ones they know is wrong, like different techniques that they use to help them go through decision making. You also have the option to flag a question and go back, but keep in mind that going back still counts against your total time. So it's not as if you get free time to go back. It's still, and once you can only go back in one section and you have three sections. So you can't wait till the end and see if you have time. You got to make a decision at the end of section one if you want to take more time to review the ones you flagged or if you want to keep going.
Okay. Okay. I got to start cranking through some example questions, I guess.
So what was super helpful for me was, and I told this to my mentor group. I gotta find out the name of the app again. I need to look at it. But it was this app that I used. It was a free app. It was super helpful for me because um, I could go and use it on the side, like when I was like maybe at a doctor's office or sitting out waiting for my kid to come out of school. Pocket Prep, that's what it was called. They have a paid version, but I just did the free version, which it just gave you 5 questions, I think, every day on
Mhm.
PMP. And that was a good way for me to start getting introduced into questions that would be on the PMP test when I didn't have a lot of time, when I didn't have an hour to sit down with the book, but maybe I had, 10 minutes waiting for my son at the orthodontist. I could pull out Pocket Prep and just go through a couple questions, and you get like 5 new questions for free every day. So that was super helpful for me. And then
Okay.
David McLaughlin, for me, he's a YouTuber that